Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today it's time for video number 8 of my Beginning Gardener series. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of raised beds and a little bit about how to build them and the pros and cons on each method of building them. Now, the last video that I did was covering raised garden beds, and we talked a little bit about the pros and cons of that. And I actually use raised garden beds now that I'm gardening here in Utah. And we covered the reasons that I do that in my last video. I have poor soil and I have slope, so that has kind of limited me to raised garden beds. But when I gardened in California, I actually gardened in ground. We had absolutely wonderful soil. It was just a deep, rich, volcanic soil. There was some clay, but I was able to amend it and help that. So I did garden in ground in California, and it was absolutely perfect. I've gardened in raised beds here in Utah, and that has also been perfect. So it just really depends on your situation. So let's go over a little bit about how you can build your raised beds. Now, there's several different ways to build your in-ground garden beds, and I wanted to talk about a couple of those. Now, one of them is called double digging. And if you're as old as I am, maybe you'll remember how popular that was. Now, double digging is basically taking your garden, digging a trench, piling the soil to the side, digging down a shovel depth again, pulling that soil out, mixing that with amendments, and then starting on the next trench. So the soil for the next trench, you're going to pile into the first trench that you built. You're going to mix that with amendments, dig it again, mix that with amendments, pile it on top of that. Then you're going to continue on down the line until you've double dug your entire garden area. Then you're going to fill the last trench in with the soil that you dug out of the first trench. Now, that is a huge amount of work, and that is one of the cons of it. The second con is that it actually destroys the structure of your soil, and it disrupts the microorganisms in the soil. Now, microorganisms will recover, but the structure doesn't recover as quickly as the microorganisms do. Now, when I say structure of the soil, you need to have what are called aggregates in the soil, and that's when the soil clumps together. What that does is it improves porosity, and it improves the soil surface area that is able to hold the water and hold nutrients. Now, when you destroy the soil structure, it actually flattens out those aggregates, removes the air pockets, and it makes it harder for the soil to allow water to go through it. So I did double dig my garden in California and worked for several years after that to try and improve the soil structure again, because we did cause a little bit of drainage problems with that. And the clay would become really compact by the next year. So the pros of it is the first year you actually have improved fertility because you've dug all the amendments down into the soil. And the first year the soil structure seems to be a little bit better because it improves the drainage of the clay because you've aerated it a little bit. So first year it's great. From that point on, it's not so good. So there's another method of building your garden beds, and that's called no-till. And probably most of you have heard of no-till gardening, and it's basically that. You don't till or dig the garden to preserve the structure of the soil and to preserve the microorganisms. Now, the pros of that is, number one, you retain the soil structure. And number two, it's a lot less work. But the cons are that it does not work very quickly. Now, the thought is when you pile the compost and the mulch on top of the soil, that the microorganisms will work through, bring that compost down into the soil and improve the structure. Now, this picture right here is a picture of my soil after 10 years of keeping compost and mulch over the top of it, and it has not improved at all. Part of the problem is that that's between my garden beds, and I do not allow any water to go in through there. So you do need moisture, and you do need the microorganisms, and microorganisms thrive on organic matter, and if there's no organic matter in the soil, you're not going to get as many microorganisms. So it does take a long time to do it that way. Now, the solution that I have found, and sorry for my voice, I've been a little sick lately. That's why we didn't have as many videos last week. So my voice is a little rough. But anyway, the solution that I've found to the problems with no-till gardening is to do a hybrid of tilling and no-tilling. Now, when I say that, what I mean is the first year it is better to go through and till in or dig in your amendments. That adds the organic matter into the soil so you have a better habitat for the microorganisms. And from that point on, it does work to just put compost or mulch on the top of your beds. Now, when you're building your beds, there are a few issues that you need to think about. Number one, it is not good to walk across your beds, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell where your beds are. So one solution for that, and also helps with the till versus no till, is to actually dig pathways into your garden beds. Now the pictures that I have here are a little deeper than I would actually go, but you can dig the soil out of the area that you're going to use for a path and then pile it on top of the area you're going to use for your garden bed. And that would also help. You can mix the compost into there, keep it mulched, and then from that point forward, you would probably do well, depending on your soil type, without having to till or dig from that point on. Now, when creating your paths, another thing to think about is, how wide of a path do you need? I like to always leave paths wide enough to get a wheelbarrow through so that it is easier to work in your gardens. But how you build your garden is dependent on your soils, and it's dependent on your circumstances. So I challenge you to go out and look at your garden area and think about whether or not you need raised beds or in-ground beds. There are pros and cons to both, and like I said repeatedly in this video, it just depends on your circumstances. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll